आपके पास मैम का पर्सनल नंबर है तो वो मैम को बोलो.
Given income level and price for a commodity in the market, the consumer will increase the quantity demanded only if the price is decreasing. So that's how you are establishing the relationship between price and quantity demanded. So you say Qx is a function of Px with ceteris paribus. Okay, so in this theory, up to now we have
हेलो सब लोग YouTube वहाँ पर ऑनलाइन क्लास
we have
वहाँ पर साथ दिख रहा है.
taken the approach of
सर्च करिए स्वाति जैन मैम करके. नहीं YouTube नहीं चल रहा है आज क्लास. अरे मेरे भाई
cardinal utility,
मैं YouTube पे भी हूँ और इस पे भी दोनों पे ज्वाइन किया हूँ. देख रहा हूँ YouTube पे भी.
where the utility is measurable.
ब्रदर शायद तुम्हारा सर्वर
Okay, we can quantify the utility, we can measure the utility, and money is the measuring rod for utility. Please pay attention to this. You are measuring the utility in terms of price of the commodity or money spent by the consumer or the price paid by the consumer. So if the consumer is willing to pay a price, it means that there is an indication that the equivalent amount of utility consumer is deriving. That's why only he is willing to pay the price. So there is one more important thing for us to understand is whenever we are talking about demand and supply, remember that willingness is one important factor. When you say demand or quantity demanded, it means you are talking about the willingness of the consumer. That consumer is willing to pay a price or consumer is willing to consume the commodity or certain units of the commodity. Similarly, when you are talking about supply, you are talking about willingness of supply. So willingness of the supplier means that at a given price, the supplier is willing to sell some quantity. And that's how we say that as the price goes up, supply goes up, because supplier will be willing to sell more and more only if the price is increasing, and consumer will be willing to consume more and more only if the price is decreasing. So that's how you establish the law of demand. Okay, now up to now, this willingness in both cases, willingness depends on the price paid. So this price is the measure of price paid becomes the measure of utility. Okay, but this cardinal approach has certain limitations, which we have already discussed in the previous class, that cardinal approach has its limitation and its limitation or shortcomings. So these limitations are based on, the first is utility is measurable. On the contrary, what we know is utility is most of the time very subjective. So it is very difficult to measure the utility. Okay. And more importantly, the second point or the second limitation of this cardinal approach is that we have taken marginal utility of money and income to be constant. So this is one most serious limitation of this cardinal approach, that we are saying that every unit of money, every unit of income gives the same marginal utility to the consumer. And now it is very essential for you all to understand this concept of marginal utility. Okay, remember that marginal utility means that change in the total utility with one extra unit change in commodity. So this marginal utility is being assumed as constant for money as well as income. Now, again, in reality, marginal utility of money and income will not remain constant, because as your income becomes less and less, maybe marginal utility of each unit of money rises for you. If you have more money in your pocket, maybe you will be less careful. But if you have very less money in your pocket, you will spend each and every note or coin with carefulness, right? So in that sense, measuring the money, measuring the utility in terms of money is not very rational, because remember that in all this law of demand, in all the theories of economics, the assumption is rational consumer. Okay, consumer is very rational. So when the consumer is rational, there is another limitation with this cardinal approach. Rational consumer cannot exactly choose the bundle of goods. Okay, so it is very difficult for a rational consumer to choose the bundle of goods. So therefore, there is an alternative approach to solve these limitations. Okay, now what are these limitations? The first, the as we said, that a rational consumer can state its preference. Now here state means express or show or reveal. Okay, so rational consumer can state its preference, but it cannot explain exactly that which unit is giving more utility or which unit is giving less utility. So it means that the consumer, which is rational in its behavior, can order the preferences, order the preferences. He cannot rank, he cannot count it in terms of numbers, but he can always rank the preferences. He can order the preferences in terms of more or less. Okay. And another important point regarding the behavior of the consumer is that generally every consumer wants to consume more than one good at a time. What it means, at a given point of time, consumer generally does not consume a single commodity. Like suppose you are consuming car. So for consuming car, you need to have petrol also simultaneously. Anything, any consumption is not a single commodity consumption. Most of the time, single commodity consumption is not possible. If you are using notebook, you need to have pen. If you are reading book, you need to have pencil. Or if you are wearing shoes, you need to have either shoe polish or socks or something which is necessary for that shoe. Laces. So when we are talking about consumer behavior, so when we are talking about shoe, we are talking about shoe. We can talk about the laces separately. We can talk about the shoe polish separately. So similarly, this another approach which is based on ordinal utility. Ordinal utility, where the utility is no longer required to be measured, but it is only in terms of preferences. So order of preferences or rank of preferences. Okay. Now when this approach is taken, there are two theories which are used by economists. One is indifference curve approach, and the other is revealed preference approach. Revealed preference. So consumer can only state that which commodity gives a higher satisfaction or a lower satisfaction. So you are only talking in terms of rank, higher or lower, less or more. Okay, better than or worse than. So these are the terms which you are using when you are talking about consumption. Okay, so if this is the situation, we are talking about ordinal utility. Like suppose you are, I'm asking you that which fruit you want to consume. So maybe your answer will be that I prefer apples more than oranges. I prefer grapes more than pomegranate. Or in different ways you can express your demand. Okay. Here I am assuming that you are not putting numbers. You will definitely not say that an apple gives me 10 units of utility, but an orange gives me 8 units of utility. So it is not very rational for a consumer to express the utility in numbers most of the time. But you can always say better than, worse than, higher or lower, better or worse, less or more. Okay. So in that case, these two approaches, indifference curve. Now pay attention to these words. Indifference means when the consumer is indifferent between two. Between when the consumer is making choices, the consumer is indifferent. Like suppose you have apples and oranges. So you are indifferent between these two. You can have apples also, you can have oranges also. Most of the time you don't have a specific choice. So when the choice is indifferent between the two commodities, then we use this indifference curve approach. Or if you can clearly reveal. Revealed preference means you can clearly state that because oranges are preferred more than apples, therefore you will like to have oranges. So if you can clearly state your preference, then it is oranges. Okay, then it is revealed preference. If you can not state your preference clearly between apples and oranges, then we are using this indifference curve approach. Okay. You can always understand this concept. If you are not able to understand this indifference or revealed preference, think about your books. right? I am telling you one book, so I have a revealed preference, but you are still thinking of choosing the book. So you have 2 3 options and you are thinking which book to buy. Most of the time every student has this question, which book to buy, which is the best. So now you have 3 4 options and you are trying to put a rank for that. You are trying to have an order for that according to the utility, usefulness, or which book can get you more marks, or which book can be cheaper. So now you can state the preferences, right? You can rank in order. You cannot put the numbers to it, but you can always put the rank to it. So now J.R. Hicks is the economist who has given this indifference curve approach. When you talk about indifference curve approach, it is J.R. Hicks. Mainly J.R. Hicks has used this technique and has given this theory, but there is another economist, Edgeworth, which is also associated with this indifference curve approach. So Hicks and Edgeworth, they are these two economists who are talking about this approach. Okay, and there is another economist, J.R. Hicks and R.J. Allen. They wrote an article, a reconsideration of the theory of value. If you will pay attention to the words which we are talking about, or see the title of the book, these two people, J.R. Hicks and R.J. Allen, gave the complete shape to this indifference curve approach. So this indifference curve theory, which we will be now discussing, is related to Hicks and Allen. Now Hicks and Allen, they are writing a book, a reconsideration of the theory of value. Okay, so they were trying to modify the theory of value. Value here, you should simply understand the utility. How do you fix up a value for something? Like, have you ever wondered that how price of every commodity is fixed? Generally, each and every thing which you buy from the market has a price. Now, how this price is fixed? So generally, when we talk about value, there are two values: intrinsic value and use value, or you can also call this as exchange value. Like, suppose there are two commodities, one is gold and the other is food grain. Okay, so food grain and gold both have a exchange value, that if you exchange gold or food grain with someone, you can get another commodity. So that is the exchange value, and that is also known as the use value, that how you can use it. Either you can use food grains directly, you can consume it, or you can exchange it for something else. But there is another type of value which often economists are talking about, that is intrinsic value, the inherent value of a particular commodity or an item or anything which you are talking about. Say environment. Environment can be priced also. Environment can be traded through market also, and environmental goods have their intrinsic value also. Okay, air can be priced, but at the same time air has its intrinsic value. Gold can be priced, but gold has its own value. So intrinsic value is generally different from the use value. So these economists were considering or talking about the values of commodities, and that's how they gave this indifference curve approach. Now, when we are talking about indifference curve approach, remember, When you are writing the answer for the indifference approach, you are always starting with the limitation of the cardinal approach. You are always talking about the shortcomings of the cardinal utility first, and then you are talking about this indifference curve approach. So, as earlier, first we'll talk about the assumptions of the indifference curve approach. First is rationality. Okay, when you say rationality, what do you mean by rationality? Rationality means consumer has income. One, willing to pay the price. Third, maximize utility, wants to maximize the utility. So consumer has an income, consumer is willing to pay the price, and consumer wants to maximize the utility. So consumer does not want to consume infinitely, but he will consume only up to the point where the utility is maximized, because we know that after one point of time, more consumption gives you diminishing utility. So this consumer is rational in the sense that he always wants to consume to the point where the utility is getting maximized. Okay. And these two factors you have to remember. You cannot talk about consumer behavior without considering your income and without willingness to pay. You should have a purchasing power, and at the same time you should be willing to pay. Maybe you have a willingness to buy something, but you don't have that purchasing power. You want to buy gold right now, you have a willingness, but you don't have that income. Okay, so you should have the income, as well as you should have the purchasing power as well as the willingness, and then you should be purchasing in such a way so that you are maximizing the utility. The second assumption is utility is ordinal. So because utility is ordinal, only rank, order, or preferences become important. Not utils, not the numbers. Okay. So when you say utility is ordinal, what you are saying is that consumer can rank or order basket of goods or bundles of commodities. Now you will come across through this term in your textbook. Okay, when you are talking about commodity, so this is generally basket of goods or bundles of commodity, because as I told you, no consumer consumes anything as separate commodity. Okay, most of the time a bundle of commodities or a group of commodities is consumed. Food, clothing, shelter, all three are necessary. Food, clothing, shelter, air, water, all these things are necessary for a human being. So whenever you will be purchasing, you cannot survive on a single commodity. You cannot survive only with shoes. You need to have clothes, you need to have food, you need to have education, you need to have electricity. So there are lot many things which generally consumer consumes. Okay, and therefore the satisfaction satisfaction derived from the bundle of commodities or the utility derived from the bundle of the commodities can only be ranked according to preferences. Okay. Now, third important assumption. Total utility is a function of Q1, Q2, Q3, and like that Qx, Qy up to Qn. So n is the infinite number of commodities which the consumer can consume. So total utility of a consumer does not depend on only one commodity, but it always depends on the combination of these various commodities. Okay. Now, most important assumption. Consistency, now be very attentive, okay? Consistency and transitivity of choice. Now, one thing is very clear, because consumer is consuming in bundles. Okay, there is a basket of good which contains A, B, C, D, E, F, like that. Okay, various commodities. So there is always a choice. Now, how the consumer will making the choice? So there is an assumption regarding this choice making. Choice has to be consistent and choice has to be transitive. So what do you mean by consistence? If at any point of time A is greater than B, at any point of time, if consumer has preferred A more than B, then at different point of time, B cannot be greater than A, or B cannot be preferred more than A. So if you have preferred apple for once, you will be always preferring apples than oranges. You cannot prefer oranges more than apple at another point of time. That is the assumption in this theory. So consistency is required. Okay, A is preferred to B, then B can never be preferred to A. And this will be applicable for all the commodities. N number of commodities, same is the situation. If you have preferred public transport once over your car or your personal vehicle, then in the next time period, you cannot prefer personal vehicle over public transport. Okay, so the choice has to be consistent. Transitivity means what? Transitivity means if A is preferred than B and B is preferred over C, then A is preferred over C. That this is transitivity. Okay, the first is consistency. So you have to be consistent in your choice, and then you have to be transitive. A is preferred to B, B is preferred to C. So therefore, in this bundle of commodities, A is preferred to C also. Every time this will be applicable in your choices. So if you have n number of commodities, you will be able to order these commodities or rank these commodities. Why? Because your choice will be consistent and transitive. Okay, so this is very important for us to remember, consistency and transitivity. And now I come to the last assumption. This assumption is marginal rate of substitution diminishes. Diminishes, simple term is decreasing, okay, declining. But what you say, marginal rate of substitution diminishes. Diminishes as consumption goes up. And in short, we call this MRSXY. Marginal rate of substitution of X for Y. That means if X and Y are two commodities, so if you are increasing X, then you have to decrease Y. If you want to consume one more unit of X, then you have to decrease the unit demanded for Y. Okay. If you want to consume one more unit of X even, then the unit of Y has to be substituted with X. So you need to forego the consumption of Y in order to increase the consumption of X. Can you see here? You have drawn a schedule. You can make a schedule always with various commodities. So what you are doing is, now X and Y you are consuming in combinations. So now you don't have only X, but you have X and Y. So combination of X and Y, okay? You are talking about combination of goods: book and pen, notebook and pen, book and pencil, shoes and socks, shoes or laces, milk with sugar, okay, food with salt. So you have combination of commodities. Now combination, this is a combination, okay. A combination means 1 of X and 6 units of Y. B combination means 2 units of X and 5 units of Y. So in order to increase X by 1 unit, you need to decrease Y by 1 unit. C combination means 3 units of X and 3 units of Y. So in order to increase 1 unit of consumption, you have to forego 2 units of Y. Initially, you have foregone only 1 unit. Now you are foregoing 2 units. Okay, the difference between 6 and 5 and the difference between 5 and 3. So you are substituting Y with X, and this is the marginal rate of substitution. For every increase in X, how much quantity of Y you have to substitute or you have to forego. That tells you the marginal rate of substitution. Now we will understand this more, okay? Don't worry. We will be talking throughout indifference curve approach. We will be talking only about marginal rate of substitution. So you don't have to worry about that. Now see, now here, this is your diagram, and please be careful. The line has to be straight. Okay. Now on the X axis, you are taking X good. On the Y axis, you are taking Y good, because you are consuming the combination of these two commodities, bundle of commodities. So bundle of commodity contains X and Y both. Okay. Now according to this ordinal approach, according to this ordinal approach based indifference curve theory, the demand curve looks like this, and this is known as indifference curve. Indifference curve. Now, how do you define this indifference curve? Indifference curve is a locus of combination of two commodities when the consumer remain indifferent and the level of utility remains same with changes in the x and y combination. So indifference curve is a locus of combinations. Why we are saying locus? Because it passes through various points A, B, C, D. Now A tells you that you can have x1 and y1. B tells you that you can have at the same time you can have y2 and x2, or you can have x3 and y3, or you can have x4 and y4. So these are various combinations. A is a combination, B is a combination, C is a combination, D is a combination. Now all these combinations give you various units of x and y. And as you increase x, y comes down. Or as you increase y, x will come down. So you are substituting one good with the other. So there is a substitution taking place. Okay. And the substitution takes place in such a way that on this curve, on this indifference curve, you are indifferent. Your level of utility remains the same. Whether you are at A, or whether you are at B, or whether you are at C, or whether you are at D, the combination of both X and Y changes, but the level of satisfaction, but the level of utility remains the same. So you are indifferent because the level of utility remains the same. Okay. So you are talking about, say, you are talking about one tube rod and one fan. You are talking about two tube rods and one fan. You are talking about two tube rods and two fans. And you are talking about three fans and one tube rod. Irrespective of these combinations, your level of utility remains constant. Level of utility is what? Getting perfect light and air. So that is fulfilled. So on a given indifference curve, please pay attention to this. On a given indifference curve, various points on the indifference curve indicate different combinations of x and y where the utility level remains the same. So I'm stopping here. We'll meet in the next class and continue from here. Thank you.